Hello and welcome to this video on Lightroom's lens blur tool. This attempts to recreate depth of field blur in your photos using the power of AI. I can show you how this works very quickly. Here's my original unedited image. If I go to the lens blur panel and check the apply box, Lightroom will quickly analyze my image, identify what it thinks is my main subject, and then blur what it thinks is the background. Now I think that result is pretty remarkable since I haven't had to do anything else. It's not perfect and there are some glitches I can show you in a moment, but straight off I'd say this is the best fake blur tool I've used. If I move the blur amount slider left and right, you can get a pretty good impression of what this tool is doing and how quickly it does it. I'm working on a virtual copy of my image, so I can also open up the original side by side in compare view so that you can see the difference. Now you can attempt similar things with radial, elliptical or linear masks in other programs and plugins, but not with this degree of subject recognition, and the way Lightroom goes about it is especially clever. Let's take a closer look. Over in the lens blur panel, you can see this very interesting gadget, which effectively acts as a kind of depth map. You could also think of it as a depth histogram, I guess, with closest distances on the left and furthest on the right, and in between you get a visual indication of where objects appear on this virtual distance scale. I can also click this visualize depth button here to see how the image looks when separated into these different depth zones. They're color coded too for easy recognition. So right now I can see that the depth gadget has been positioned over what Lightroom thinks is the nearest object in the scene, and this is what it will bring into sharp focus. If I move this gadget to the right, you can see how the focus shifts to the background and the foreground object goes out of focus. You can also drag the edge handles of this focus gadget, in effect controlling the depth of field in your photos. But if all this sounds a bit too good to be true, well, then you're right. While I've been demonstrating this tool, you've probably noticed that some of the edge details on the main subject don't always look quite right. Some small leaves that are clearly part of the floral tribute in the foreground are being blurred as if they are part of the background. That's not all. If I look closely at areas between the flowers where the background is visible, I can see that it's still sharp. It's as if the lens blur tool can identify a subject's overall outline, but isn't good at spotting holes in the subject where more distant objects show through. Of course, it's early days yet. At the time of making this video, the tool is still labelled early access, so there's probably more development work to be done. Already though, it can create a very effective depth of field effect that looks convincing and natural at first glance. And let's face it, on the internet, a first glance is just about all that any photograph will get. Any experienced photographer though who looks a little closer will quickly see the flaws. But even so, I think with a little juggling of the sliders, and as long as you don't try to achieve unrealistic levels of blur, the effect can be quite convincing. It's not the same as using a wide lens aperture and a longer focal length to blur a background naturally, but that's not always possible. And when it isn't possible, Lightroom's lens blur tool is a very effective digital alternative that can make a muddled composition much more effective and striking. So I hope you find this quick tour of Lightroom's lens blur tool useful. Thanks for watching and see you next time.